Welcome to the Embodied Sounds podcast. My name is Joshua Sandmiller. I'm a musician, environmentalist, and entrepreneur focused on helping people connect back to the natural world through the arts. On this podcast, we'll be exploring specifically how sound can help you live a more healthy and balanced life. Please learn more at embodiedsounds.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Embodied Sounds podcast. I'm here today with Boris Lelong from Paris. He's calling in to talk about his work as an anthropologist, a musician, and explorer of creativity in the natural world. We're so excited to have him on the episode today. Welcome, Boris.
Oh, thank you, Joshua. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation.
How are you doing today? What's going on in your life in this moment?
Right now, I'm enjoying the cool temperature after a couple of days that have been pretty hot. And so now it's just cool and actually rainy. And it feels good. Nice.
And we seem to have a shared interest for ocean sounds. I was very pleased to see your album recently released album that uses similar recordings to ones that I've heard in my journey from the Monterey Bay Aquatic Research Institute. And I'm just so excited to hear from you what these recordings really felt like for you to hear them and hear a bit about your passion for working with ocean music.
Well, Ocean, that's this project which led to this album called Megaptera. It started with these recordings of whale songs, and the first one I heard I was a child, probably somewhere in the 80s. I discovered these recordings with these amazing voices from the ocean, and it's always been there somewhere in the corner of my head that someday I'd like to make some music, some soundscapes, with the voices of whales. And well, it just happened this year, a bit by chance. I was looking for dolphin recordings for another project and was searching on the web. I found that recording from Monterey Bay Area Research Institutes, and I didn't know anything about this institute, but I was very pleased to hear the recordings which they put online for all of us to listen to and to explore. And I stumbled on this recording of humpback whales, and 2 hours and a half long. So I like that we have the time to immerse ourselves in the recording and say, oh, that's the one. I want to try something with this one. And it was more than a year ago. It took me a year to complete the album, but it really, it came very quickly. The music came very naturally, and it's been a joy to spend because it takes dozens and maybe hundreds of hours working on an album like this one, listening to the sound world of the whales and then my sounds. So it was a journey. It was a journey and a beautiful one.
Wonderful. Yes, congratulations on releasing the album and finishing that project. I can definitely understand the amount of work that you're describing that goes into something like that. And, it's been quite a fun journey for me to also meet a lot of people in the world who enjoy whale music, dolphin music, and ocean recordings. I was introduced to an artist, maybe you know him as well, Paul Winter, back from the 70s, 80s, also working with many whale recordings. And I find there's a worldwide community of people who really connect with life underwater, and it's nice to meet a fellow one. So I was so excited. This is why I start our conversation here, because my friend and colleague at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, Dr. John Ryan, was who introduced me to your work. And I just love how these sound recordings can build connection from people all over the world to share something that they have a mutual interest in, So it's yes, it's nice to meet someone else who's been struck by these sounds.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and same for me. When you contacted me, I got a chance to hear your music and your beautiful concerts with the video. And I'm sure it's another thing, and I'm sure it's been quite beautiful experiences for the people who went in this dome. You make these concerts in domes with projections of videos from underwater. It looks stunning, and congratulations.
Thank you.
This is another way of playing with the sounds of these whales and letting them to be heard outside of the ocean on the surface.
Yes, well, it's been my experience doing this Sounds of the Ocean project that people are really looking for ways to transport to a different environment, and so I'm really curious to develop experiences that help bring them there. And I'm finding that the ocean is really an environment that provides a lot of positive benefits to our overall state of health and well-being. As individuals, as humans that mostly spend time on land, to spend time in water, around water, or immersed in water, specifically the ocean, usually helps people feel a lot better in their own personal life. And I'm curious if you have, this is just from a lot of personal experience and listening to feedback of people who've come to our concerts. I'm not a scientist. I haven't done an official study, though I have spoken with other researchers who could back up that claim. And I'm curious if you have maybe a memory from a time that you were in the sea that brought you a lot of joy, in a feeling, a place of a good state of being that you'd like to share.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I haven't spent much time in the sea. So, like this project, like Megaptera, it's about whales. I've never seen a whale in my life, and I've very little connection with the actual ocean. So this is more about imagination, an imagined place. Like, for example, I have an album which I have not released yet, but which I recorded 30 years ago. It's about planet Mars, and I definitely have never been to Mars. So I'm more into that when I make music and I create these worlds, with sounds. It doesn't have to be real worlds. And actually, I'm interested in how music helps us, and is a good vehicle for our imagination and take us to some places that we have never been and maybe that don't exist at all. So I don't relate it so much. I mean, this project, this Megaptera project, to any actual experience in the ocean, though. I remember swimming on some coral reefs in the Indian Ocean in Tanzania, lots of small little fish. It was quite marvelous experience, but I learned to swim in the sea in Western France, that's for sure also, but it's a different thing, just on the beach. And when I was a child, Roth Sea, that's very good to learn how to swim. And that most of the ocean I've seen probably from the window of a plane when I was traveling, going to Madagascar, to the Philippines. The Philippines was on land, but Madagascar, especially the Indian Ocean, I've seen more of it from the window than swimming in it. So, music, imagination. This is something I like to work. I have another project called Perdid, which is another sound world, which is not marine at all. It's more like a forest. Which comes from an animated film called The Masters of Time. And so it's some planets, it's science fiction film. So I composed the soundscape out of the actual sounds from the film, the small bits of the environments of these planets. Again, it's an imaginary world. And music is very interesting in it's the power it has to bring us to some places just with our imagination and the way sounds can connect to this. So That's my perspective.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love the diversity of your work and of your experience to span across many different environments and imaginary worlds, including Mars. I'm excited to hear that when you feel one day ready to share it. And I guess I would love to understand more about how you built this connection to sound. What maybe was your inspiration to go down this path with it as a way of expression?
As a listener first, when I was maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, I started listening to music on the radio, recording with my cassettes, and I was fascinated by instrumental music. When there's no song, nobody's singing, and it opens up the imagination, it opens a space. And I started with Vangelis, Jean-Michel Jarre, electronic musicians or electroacoustic. Vangelis tends to mix acoustic instruments and electronics, but they had this amazing thing for me that they were able to create this sort of film music for the imagination. And this is somebody I discovered a few years later, Brian Eno, who had very interesting ideas about this. He made an album called Music for Films, and there was no film involved. He just made the music, and the film, well, the listener is going to provide the film. And so, yeah, as a listener first. And then when I was 14, I got my first synthesizer, and I started building sounds. Now, I couldn't compose music because that would require equipment I didn't have at the time to record, multi-track recorders and everything, but I could at least play and tweak sounds. I was very fascinated by sound itself. And way later on, when I was maybe 18, 19, I got my first computer. It was with a Cubase. So now I bought a new synthesizer, and now I could make this soundscape, like the one on Mars was designed at that time, composed at that time. And but listening to music first, it's really started there, and having this interest in instrumental music that can open up your imagination. And then gradually I made my own. I haven't produced that many albums during all this time, but because I take time, it takes me a lot of time to produce an album, and because I like that, and I like to dive. It's really diving would be a good word when working in this soundscape, because you have to spend a lot of time and listening again and again and again and tweaking small things, and then a few days later listening to the entire album and taking notes. This I have to change. This I can make it shorter. This longer. More sound, more reverb here, and then going back to the computer and make the changes. So in the end, you spend countless number of hours in a different world, in an imagined world, just by working on it. And so I don't know if many people listen to my albums. It's very confidential, but I hope they get, the listeners get to have a little bit of that experience that I have when I compose them.
I'm very sure that they do, and I can share from what I've heard that it really did take me on a journey, and was very very relaxing. Actually, I was listening to Megaptera, to prepare for our conversation, and the rhythmic simplicity of the synthesizer and the sequencing that you've done with electronic instruments, I really found to be very kind of meditative, actually. It was very kind of trance-inducing, it kind of just puts me in this, okay, this is very much happening, and it's slow, and there's something building, but everything was very, very gentle, and nothing really stuck out. And I could tell, that really was crafted with a lot of care and a lot of good listening. And I love that you say it started with listening, because I often talk a lot about that on this podcast. Because for me, I really find the practice of music to be all about listening, and really how to create something that sounds any good requires that ability to listen first. And I'm curious if you've noticed as you've been a sound artist and working with these field recordings and creating music yourself, has that translated to a way of being, a way of listening in maybe other areas of your life, like in relationships or in work situations, like, you know, kind of what I'm talking about? It's has there been a link there for you? Maybe not.
No, I would. Yeah, these projects I make, or these soundscape projects, it's really about imagination, as I said earlier. So it's a bit disconnected from from real life. Unlike other music projects which have been involved in, like in you mentioned anthropology, so I've been involved in many ethnomusicological projects in various parts of the world, including France, including the town where I live. And this was really related to my life. It was more into the real world music, you could say. That was the name of Peter Gabriel's label of world music started in the late 80s, the real world. And in a way, I could say that. I guess part of my music is about the real world, and part of my music is about how we can imagine worlds, or just for a while, just leave the everyday world. And we as human beings, we like to do that once in a while. And there are many ways to do it, but just to forget a little bit and just go somewhere else and come back refreshed and with new energy.
Yeah. Well, I noticed on your website you're sharing some of your anthropological work with different societies around the world, indigenous societies around the world that you've gotten to spend time with. And I love how you say here, it's written at the top, I began to observe societies through the prism of their musical practices. This for me, as a musician, is also fascinating, and I'm curious, as a researcher, an anthropologist, musicologist, what can we learn? What have you learned by spending time doing that?
The first thing that impressed me the most, and that was the beginning of my involvement in the running projects with people, recording projects. So I would go in some community and then come back again, spend months and months and months. And with the people of one village, one group, the idea was to make a CD. But the CD is the objective, but of course the road that's going to lead to the CD is the interesting part, because we're going to explore their music world, all the instruments they play, and the repertoire of songs and melodies. And so these projects, it all started, I would say, from one experience in a small village in Zambia, in western Zambia, that was in 1992. And we spent 2 days. We were supposed to start to record one music instrument, something very rare, where you rub a drum, with a stick. So it started with this. We were just supposed to record one piece of music, maybe 4 minutes, in the little house in the village. The microphones, the musicians, we record, and then somehow it lasted for 2 days. It involved the entire village, and more people kept coming, and with music, dance, other instruments, xylophones, theater, and all the way to the evening. It was just incredible. And the energy I experienced, the energy I saw from the people, which is very contagious, is something I had never experienced before in my life. And I was struck, and what's going on there? How is that even possible? And I guess that was the beginning of something for me. And also it was the beginning of music of the real world, because as a teenager, I was really into escapism, like listening to this music, Vangelis, Klaus Schulze, and I loved this with my headphones, and I would just fly away to other places. And I was not so good with the real world thing. I was just a very normal person, but this experience, in my first experience in Africa in the early 90s, was really about this. When I came back, for example, I fell in love with jazz music. I listened to Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage album, and it struck me. And that was the real world music. Very different from the other world's music, music for imagination. And then these two dimensions have always been present in my life. Real world imagination and with music, and of course with the way we run our lives. And I was very happy because when I started this project called Altamira for the music projects, world music projects, and I also worked in my town, Saint-Denis, and a lot with old people, with the elder people. So they are into French song, or old French songs, and it was very interesting because they described to us society and music and singing as it was like before World War II. And what they were describing was very similar to what I had experienced in Africa, differently, but the same idea that music as something that helps the people to socialize. And people would sing songs in the streets, even in the bus, in the metro. It was very common, and they missed that. And we've been working organizing events in all sorts of places in town where people would come with their songs, with their music instruments, and we just improvise, with like a picnic with whatever people bring, and we combine musics and songs and styles with old people, young people, and at some point we managed to have moments that were so incredible in their energy and the sharing and the joy. At some point I realized it was 25 years later, after my first experience in that village in Zambia, and say, we made it. We have it now here in France. And we didn't have to import culture from Zambia, actually. That was never involved at any point. It's just with the local culture of people who were there. And so here music and real life, human relations, it's more in that part of music of the real world that I found it, more than the music for the imaginary.
Incredible. What was calling you about Africa in particular? What do you think drew you to that part of the real world?
Oh, now we are connecting. Thank you. One of the very important influence, I think I've always been aware of this, is an album by Vangelis called La Fête Sauvage, which means wild festivities. And on the cover of the CD, there was a couple of lions, and you hear the lions and many African animals, in the album. It has this very African atmosphere. He actually hired African musicians to play drums and sing, and he brings his electronics in that, some flute, and it was my first album by Vangelis. I was maybe 12, 13 years old when I discovered it, and it's still one of the best, one of the most powerful albums in my life story. So probably, this helped. This was pure imagination for me, imaginary landscapes, inspired by some real ones, of course. And I had that in mind. So when the first time I decided to go to Africa, I had a tape recorder, DAT, this is gone technology. And but I had this idea, I want to walk. My dream was to walk in these vast landscapes, trekking in the places with wildlife or wild spaces, I would say. Wilderness would be the concept. And I would probably meet people on the way because there's always human beings all over the planet. And my idea is if there's music and something I could record, and that worked very well in Zambia, the experience I was mentioning earlier. So in a way, these worlds, imagination and real world, can connect sometimes in unpredictable ways.
Wow. So you really felt the call at a young age, it sounds. You knew quite young that this was something you wanted to focus on or interested in.
Yeah, truly, call is the word. It was like that because it was so bizarre for me to start doing this. It was so outside of everything in my life. It was just my imagination here, but somehow one day I bought a plane ticket, and I didn't know anybody who was doing this, and it was much less frequent in the early 90s than it is today. And I went to parts of Africa that was totally unknown, especially from us in France. We're very familiar with West Africa, which is French-speaking, and part of Central Africa. But I went to South Africa, which had this country had been closed until a few months before with the apartheid, which had been, fortunately, there was great news, abolished. So the country was just beginning to open, but we didn't know anything about it. But I didn't stay in South Africa. I went to Zambia just by chance, because I met somebody who told me, hey, go to my country, Zambia. Okay. I went and I discovered that village, and that was a very founding experience. But it was a call, yeah. Call was the word.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can feel that, and notice that's a word you also use on your Megaptera album, the first call, second call. So it's coming back around. And I love talking about this part of the journey, because we all start somewhere. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe are asking themselves, what's the call? Where am I supposed to go next? What is my path, or my interest, or my purpose? There's a lot of talk about that for sure these days. And I'm curious, maybe looking back on all of your experience since then, like what advice maybe might you have for someone just starting out who might be a little bit not as clear as you were, or as a little hesitant to take the first step and buy that plane ticket to listen to the call? What would you say to that person?
That's, I don't know. Yes, definitely. But as we say, it's better to regret something we've done than to regret something we have not done. So yes, of course. Yeah, of course. But the thing is, I could not have predicted what happened. And in some way, what happened was way beyond what I could have imagined. But the strong part was really what I described about that village and what it started with me, the recording of music. Because I had no experience, and there was nothing in my life and in the things I knew how to do, which wasn't much, that it was a surprise in a way to me that it worked so well, this recording music with people in villages in rural Africa, which was so away from my life experience. And this worked really well. And that's why I kept, of course, I went to the Himalayas, I went to Lesotho, to Madagascar, and to the Philippines, and I had beautiful human experiences. But it's something really that grew on the way. So when we respond to calls, but it doesn't take you necessarily to where we thought we were going to go, because it's full of surprises. And again, I didn't know, because nothing in my life, I didn't have the know-how, and just learned on the way. And I realized, okay, I was good with that. I enjoyed it, and it worked quite well. But it's really when I started doing it, thousands of kilometers from home, that's... I realized I enjoyed this, and it changed lots of things in my life. That's really the life-changing part, is, again, real world music with people, because people is what drives our lives. So
how did it change something in your life, having these real world experiences? What's the first thing that comes to mind that you can connect to being able to go to all of these incredible places and capture what they sound like?
I would say different things. There's to me, it's relationship with people, and it taught me, it helped me run projects with groups, because I founded that project, Altamira, and I had a first experience in this. I was, I don't know the name in English, I think it's counselor. I was before, and to finance my first trip in Africa, I was working with children. Out when it's not school, we have all sorts, we take the children for holidays or whatever. So anyway, I did this for 2-3 years. So that's real world, you know, you have to deal with children, it's great responsibility, and for the whole day, 10 hours a day, and we're going to make these are very exciting things, going to the forest or whatever, making some paintings or playing football and cooking. And so without me realizing it, I think this also played an important part, but especially with running music projects with people. It's doing things with people, and you bring the project and they will bring things to the project, and sometimes people will be the ones bringing the projects, but then you sort of have to orchestrate all this, and working with music with people, that's really, it helped me reinforce this. Now intellectually also, there was this I was always, even long before traveling, I was by reading books and thinking, I was interested, curious about life, people, society. So of course, to me, those experiences of living with people abroad in rural cultures, this was huge in terms of intellectual explorations. And that's why right now I'm working my PhD dissertation, which is not about music at all, but it starts with Madagascar, villages in Madagascar and how people live. And I would say this. But as for the music, the kind of music we're talking about, like Megaptera, it's a bit more discreet here in the things we're talking about. But it's been there in a way. We organized cine concerts with old people in France, and it was interesting, by on a screen projecting videos and making the music direct live. What you do very beautifully in splendid settings with your concerts in domes. And so we did a little bit of this, and we involved old people who were so far away from all of this, reading Native American poetry in the cine concert, at specific points. It's just, So, and the people can really travel in this thing with this music we play, which is very similar to what you heard in Megaptera, plus acoustic instruments like didgeridoo and Native American flutes. It was about there was one of these concerts was about Native American landscapes in the Southwest of the USA. And to take these people from, these retired people from working class environments, they understood it very well, and they were very glad to take part in it for those who read the poetry. And it's interesting to connect these very, very different worlds and bring that style of music, which is not very easy to approach. It's not the music we hear every day on the radio or on TV. And it can work. And it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I would love to see any recordings of these cine concerts. I've never heard that term before. I think that's a good one. And if you have some, you have to send them over. Well, I'm really inspired by your passion for understanding different cultures, and I can see that being a real thread throughout your life and throughout your work. And from your travels, even if it has nothing to do with music or sound, what would you say is helpful for people who might be kind of struggling in today's world to just feel a bit better?
It's a difficult question. I don't know, because what might work for myself might work for someone else. But feeling better, I don't know. It's all about people. Really, it's very simple. It's the most basic things, but the people we love around us, and try to. This is very important. It's also a source of great misery, of course. We know also conflict, even violence, comes also from the narrow environment. One more reason to work on making it even better. And of course, there's a great issues that we're all facing today in the situation of our world. And these are huge questions, issues. But I don't know, inspiration. There's something about beauty, maybe, that I was reminded of that by, unfortunately, the Vangelis, musician, passed away a few weeks ago. He was saying very poetic way of saying things about how beauty, our sense of beauty, because all human beings, there are things we found beautiful. It can be anything, the beauty of ornaments, of music, of a painting, of a natural landscape, of a person. But in a way, when we see beauty, because we manage to, from just plain facts from the world, we can see it as something beautiful. And that helps us, how can I say it, bring harmony out of chaos. The reality can be seen as chaos, meaningless chaos, and maybe our sense of beauty is a way of giving not a meaning. It doesn't have to be meaning, but harmony probably, and maybe it's something that can guide us to try to see the harmony within chaos, probably. Ways to simplify things, and the chaos and the harmony can be anything. Can be social relations, a community, a town, a country, the world, and seeing it, and of course crafting it if possible together. We cannot do anything alone. It's all about people together.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there, and I have also gotten to spend a lot of time in the real world, traveling to different cultures and building those relationships with people on a human level, and really a direct connection, which I think is such a big part of what allows a person to be healthy, happy, really feeling full in life, and really hope that more people can get those opportunities and really get access and be able to understand really what that can feel like. We have a shared passion for the wilderness as well, and I've gotten lost quite a few times in walks in the woods, and used to lead backpacking trips with teenage kids for about 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and would always just love how the wilderness kind of humbles everyone to the same level, no matter where you come from, or how much money you have, or what your background is, race, ethnicity, religion. None of that really matters when you're just camping in the woods needing to survive, and you have to learn how to do things together. So I feel like there's a lot of shared experience with that between us, and as a composer, I've really tried to bring some of that into the musical soundscapes that I've been creating, and just love working with recordings of the natural world combined with musical instruments, whether they're analog like clarinet or digital like the synthesizer, because I really do feel like this connection piece is what's missing for a lot of people in the world to nature, and have just been really inspired by your commitment to that, and how it's woven itself throughout many different projects and decades. Would you agree with that kind of lens on things?
Yes, of course. Yeah. And there's something in what you say about being in natural environments, less man-made environments. It has an effect on us when it works well and that the experience is okay. And also, of course, and this is what we want to avoid, of course, it can become tragic, because being lost in a non-man-made world, lost in the middle of desert, you don't know where you are, and with no water, and it can become like scary and of course deadly. But there's definitely something to be the experience of being in a non-man-made environment. It can be very strong emotionally, positive or negative emotions. It depends on people, on places, on moments of people's lives. But as for me, it's always been something very powerful and something that I've always craved for. And not to say that man-made environments, of course, are not good, because again, it's all about people. But it's good not forget this. I live in a city in an entirely built environment and lots of trees actually. And we don't always realize how it depends on, not all cities are the same in the world. Some cities, like I remember like Manila or Delhi. Delhi, some places you have some trees, but not that many. Some towns can be really entirely man-made with hardly any vegetation at all. It's very difficult, and millions of our fellow human beings live in such environments, and it's actually difficult. Now, some other places like mine, which is not so great, but actually it's full of trees, but we don't pay attention. And but yeah, it's good to be outside. So it's good you had this experience with these kids, spent 2-3 weeks hiking in the wilderness. I think these are great experience and needed ones, especially with the young generation. It's interesting to taste that early on.
Wonderful. Well, where can we learn more about your work and support what you're doing now?
Well, I'm in a phase of my life where I'm quite discreet. After many years, I was doing conferences and shows and running projects with lots of people. And now I'm concentrating on my PhD. And I just have some music projects on the side, which is good for me. It's a sort of window and a little break, like Megaptera. It was very, very pleasant working on that one. But yeah, not much going on for the moment. Still, I'm still below the radar, as we say. I'm working on my thesis, but I hope when that is completed, I will resume and get back to more public projects, because I'm kind of missing that. And so we'll see. There's some music projects on the way. There's this one which I want to release one of these days. The one on Mars, but it's a very old project, something I recorded on maybe 1990 or 91. But I think, okay, I have it somewhere, and let me share it. And so maybe I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. And I've really enjoyed just learning about all of these experiences and ways that sound and music and travel and real reflection has woven itself throughout your journey. And hopefully for anyone listening, you found this inspiring to really listen to the call. That's something I'm really taking away from this conversation. Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. It was nice having that conversation together. And congratulations for your work, for exploring what music is and what it can do for us. And, I hope someday I get to see one of your concerts with whales in a dome or in some beautiful settings that seem to be really, really fantastic.
Thank you. I hope to have you soon. I really do.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua.